It's also it wasn't that many of them. I think the amazing thing was that there may have been 12. There may have been less than 20. But so we hit the tractor park, and you can see. And you know, guys, know what a satchel charge is? Satchel charge. Satchel charge. A satchel charge looks like that bag. It looks like a mail bag, right?
Yeah.
And it's got C4 packed into it.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is they're running down the tractors, and they're throwing these satchel charges into it because the gasoline is on the floor.
Yeah.
So if they can get it to blow up this way, it'll just go up. Okay, so while this is going on, the guys who drive the tractors have to get into the top and try to close this thing on the bottom and back them away, because as these are being blown up, it means the ones parking next to it will be blown up, right? So that's going on, and things are being blown up, and you're watching people run around, and this is being blown up, and that's being blown up, and small arms are coming in every way, and the command post is here, and you don't know who's shooting at you, and I leap into a hole where there's like, I don't know, too many people are in the hole, and as I leap into the hole and I stick my head up, there's this explosion, and I see kind of arc in the sky, you know, like a comet, like a flame. Just like this flame leaps up into the sky and lands. It must have been 100 yards away from us, but lands in the middle of the tractor park, and the Amtrak is burning, and you can see it. It's burning. It's like a bonfire, and there is this scream, and it was if the arc was. It's as if this flame was screaming, and this bonfire is screaming, and it was one of the tractor rats. Oh, the tractor rats, which we call the guys who are driving these things. It's a 20-year-old kid who burned to death in the middle of the tractor park, and none of us could get to him to put him out, and even if we could, he wouldn't have survived, because there's so much. And that's one of the things that stayed in my head. It still stays in my head, that scream that went on of this kid burning to death in the middle of the tractor park. And again, now you've got things exploding here, you've got shooting going on here. A friend of mine is the tractors are parked together, and he's running across the top of the tractors. You can see him running across the top of them to get to the last one, to drive it away, while this guy is burning, small arms are going on. It's just my memory of chaos at some point, and I hadn't been in Vietnam very long. I'd been there about maybe 5 weeks, maybe 2 months, something like that. So this has stayed in my head for more years than I can remember. So yeah, and that was the third day of 2 other things that had gone on. So we've been doing this for like days at some point. And so the end of this night is that morning, sitting in front and watching the South China Sea, the sun come up over the South China Sea. And then there was the time I was out on a patrol. We would go out on patrol, and they'd send us out in front of they'd say, okay, go into the village. You're going to set up an ambush outside the village. You're going to be maybe a couple of, 500 yards, maybe a couple 100 yards from outside the wire. And we know it's just a waste of time, so we'd go out and sit down. And I remember one night we were on ambush, and it's late. I was there a long time now. And we used to have movies there, right? Because this is a kind of strange war we lived in. We had beaches, we had surfing, we had Coca-Cola, we had outdoor movies which would show, and we had people being blown. I got this outdoor movie. And we can hear, because it's outdoor, right? Everybody's sitting outdoor watching. We can hear them laughing. So now we're really pissed off, because we've missed the comedy, right? Why weren't we there when we had the comedy? And come in the next morning and just annoyed. These things were just after a while annoying. We didn't want to be there. We didn't want to play war. We didn't want to do this crap. So we come in and walking in, and I pass one of the guys as I'm coming in. I said, "So you assholes were watching a comedy last night?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, it's the funniest thing I ever saw in my life." I said, what was it? He said, oh, it's this John Wayne stupid movie called The Green Berets. It was absolutely hysterical. It's just hysterical. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but there's a moment at the end of the movie, which a friend of mine actually put in a book, but there's a moment at the end of the movie where John Wayne is walking hand in hand with this little Vietnamese orphan.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
And they're walking down the beach.
Right.
And they're walking down the beach of South China Sea. But the sun is setting. So here's these guys 5 miles away from Da Nang about a movie that looks like Da Nang, watching John Wayne, and they've got the beach like right over here, and they thought this was just hysterical. They said this is the funniest goddamn thing they ever saw. And I guess this connects in with many years later when I was back in the United States and I was going to UC Irvine. It wasn't easy to deal with being in the war and being here then as much as people. So I didn't talk much about it, I don't think. But I remember walking by one of these student bars, and I overheard 2 guys talking. And one of them said, oh, did you see the John Wayne's The Green Berets was on last night? And the other one said, no. And the first one said, oh, you should have. That's one of the realest war movies I've ever seen. And I think that changed my life. I think at that point I realized I had to start talking about Vietnam again, because if people were confusing this thing with Vietnam, the country, if they were confusing that with Da Nang, which is a beautiful city, but that wasn't Da Nang, and the war, so you had to do something about it. So it's those kinds of, and that's why the war in the continent, you know, I've always, it is necessary and right to say Vietnam is a country and a culture, right? Because we've got all that bullshit about the Vietnam War, and now we have the Iraq War, and we have the Afghanistan War. So it's always necessary, and kind of have to insist upon that. But there is something, I think, for vets that unfortunately we all, or I recognize, I mean, because we weren't, that we didn't ever get a chance to know Vietnam. But there is this other thing, you know, and I put a name on it. I just call it Nam. And I have no desire to confuse it with the culture or to confuse it with, but that's the geography and the world in which we lived in. You know, and my relationship is with that, which is grounded in this geography. And you could always see the culture, right? You could always see the culture. You could always kind of see it over there. You could see the history. But because we were Marines, or because we were dumb Americans in 1968, we couldn't quite break that out, right? And you know, I got a history lesson over there for guys who knew about it. We had down the road from where we were at, out down the road through the village. At the end of the village was an old French fort, and so you know. And I had a friend of mine. 7 minutes, another story. We used to have a. Okay. So there, if you take a look at the pictures where Marble Mountain is, there's actually like 3 things that look like they're rocks coming up out of the ground. But it's really kind of flat, right? And there's a pass between 2 of these. There's a road. And on that pass, which is where asphalt ended, we used to have a guard post. And that meant we would stop all the Vietnamese going this way and all going out. And it was one of these memories. I don't know if it's to the point where I remember it, but I'm not quite sure if I was there. I remember it. There were these 3, and we knew enough about the dignity of those elders, those old men, right? You would see them, you would deal with them. You understood the amount of dignity that they carried with them. And I remember there were 3 of them, and they were stopped. And the soldiers, the Marines who were stopping them, kind of recognized who they were at. They're going to try to give them at least the respect that a Marine would give to somebody else. So it wasn't to be disrespectful. And one of them tried to speak his high school French to him. And you could read the look which was no way were they going to, and you know they were old enough to know French. No way were they, and we kind of giggled later. We giggled. We couldn't quite figure out they didn't answer because they didn't ever want to speak French again, or because his French was so awful that they didn't want to acknowledge it. But you could just see this in their face. And
do they see angry or?
No, no. It's that attitude. It's that deep dignity that looked at us and said, "No way in hell am I ever going to respond to that language again." I mean, that's the way we read it, right?
Yeah.
And they weren't much fond of us. I mean, I always have the feeling now that I look back on it that they pretty much thought that we were probably from a deeply, darkly uncivilized place. But you could see that no way were they going to respond to French. Bad French, good French, indifferent French. So obviously this fort that had these memories, you know, that was there. So that, and I also remember I remember this one very well, at the same post. I don't know what, there's a name for it, but those sticks that the women carry the rice baskets on, well, the Marines used to call them idiot sticks, because there's these rice baskets. And one of the ways we used to check to see, and it's extremely rude, it violates everything, but we used to check to make sure that the women who are carrying these things are real peasants.
Weapons.
Yeah, well, yeah. But we didn't go through the rice because we knew at least that time you start doing that, you're really pissing people off. But there's like a big blister. There's like a big fat piece of flesh here, right? And so if you're new to this, it's like all rubbed raw, or there's something. So if you get a hold of it, so you kind of reach in here, which is rude, right? You're reaching into the woman's thing and boom, because they've been carrying these things since they were little. But you got all these thick-headed Marines who think this is stupid. You know, you're going to walk around carrying this rice balanced on it. And I remember that, she couldn't have been very big. I don't know, 5'4" maybe. She did that thing, and she put it down, stood there. And a couple of these Marines were going to prove just how stupid it was. And they walked over to try to pick this thing up off the ground. And they could barely get it off the ground because it's like 100 and some pounds. And it has to be balanced. And you could see at one moment the kind of, they do this all the time, you know. So it's again that moment when we kind of moved outside of that closed world that we in to begin to get a hold of something else that was going on out there that was part of the culture. And you know, Marble Mountain was a tourist. I'm in the middle of the war and tourists used to come out because inside the thing we call Marble Mountain was a very famous Buddhist temple that had been built inside the thing. So my memories are strange and bizarre, and you know, you become like the Ancient Mariner. You grab a hold of somebody and you say, "Do you want to hear about the war?" And you guys show up with a camera. So. Yeah.